Emma Brooks was no stranger to hard work. At just 24 years old, she spent her days and often her nights working long shifts at Sonny's Diner, a small, worn-down cafe tucked into a quiet corner of Chicago. The cracked windows, flickering neon sign, and faded booths mirrored the struggles of her own life. But Emma wasn't the type to complain. Life hadn't been kind to her, but she had learned to find joy in the little things. Whether it was the smile of a regular customer or the satisfaction of knowing she'd made someone's day a little brighter, Emma had a gift for making people feel seen. She wasn't just a waitress, she was a listener, a friend, and sometimes even a shoulder to cry on. But behind her warm smile was a young woman carrying the weight of the world. Emma had been taking care of her younger sister Lily ever since their parents passed away. Lily was a bright, ambitious 16-year-old with dreams of becoming a doctor, but those dreams came with a price. Emma worked tirelessly to pay for Lily's school fees, often sacrificing her own needs to make sure her sister had a chance at a better future. Still, Emma never let her struggles define her. Every night after her shift, she would collect leftover food from the diner and hand it out to the homeless people she passed on her way home. To her, it was just a small act of kindness, a routine, but to those she helped, it meant everything. What Emma didn't know was that her life was about to change forever. One rainy evening, a simple act of compassion would catch the attention of someone she never expected, a man who had the power to turn her world upside down. The morning rush at Sonny's Diner was always chaotic, but Emma Brooks handled it with the kind of grace that only came from years of practice. The clatter of plates, the hiss of the coffee machine, and the hum of conversation filled the air as Emma moved from table to table, balancing trays and refilling coffee cups with a warm smile. The diner wasn't much to look at. Its cracked windows let in a draft during the winter, and the neon sign outside flickered so often that customers joked it was sending Morse code. The booths were old and worn, the vinyl seats patched with duct tape, and the walls were stained with years of grease and grime. But to Emma, it was more than just a job. It was her lifeline. Her regulars adored her. There was Mr. Thompson, an elderly man who came in every morning for his black coffee and blueberry muffin. Emma always made time to chat with him, even if it was just for a minute. Then there was Karen, a single mom who often brought her 2 young kids. Emma would sneak them extra fries when she could, knowing how hard it was for Karen to make ends meet. But Emma's kindness wasn't just reserved for her customers. Every night after her shift, she would pack up any leftover food the diner had and hand it out to the homeless people she passed on her way home. It wasn't much, just a sandwich here, a slice of pie there, but it was something. Her walk home was always the same. She'd pull her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders, her feet aching from hours of standing, and make her way through the dimly lit streets of Chicago. Her apartment was small and modest, but it was home. Inside, her younger sister Lily would usually be waiting for her, textbooks spread out across the kitchen table. "Hey, Em," Lily greeted her one night, looking up from her biology notes. "How was work?" "Busy," Emma replied, setting down her bag and kicking off her shoes. "But good. How's the studying going?" Lily sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's a lot, but I'll manage. I don't know how I'm going to get through med school without a scholarship." Emma's heart ached at her sister's words. She knew how much Lily wanted to become a doctor, and she was determined to do whatever it took to make that dream a reality. "Don't worry about that," Emma said, forcing a smile. "We'll figure it out. You just focus on your grades, okay?" Lily nodded, but Emma could see the worry in her eyes. It was the same worry she carried herself, how to make ends meet, how to keep going when the odds felt stacked against them. Despite everything, Emma never let her struggles show. She had a way of finding joy in the little moments, the laughter of a customer, the satisfaction of a job well done, the quiet pride she felt in knowing she was doing her best for Lily. But deep down, she couldn't help but wonder if this was all her life would ever be. Long hours, low pay, and the constant pressure of trying to stay afloat. She had dreams once, dreams of opening her own cafe, a warm and welcoming place where everyone felt at home. But those dreams felt so far out of reach now, buried under the weight of bills and responsibilities. Emma didn't know it yet, but her life was about to take a turn she never could have imagined. One rainy evening, a chance encounter would set off a chain of events that would change everything. It was one of those nights where the rain seemed relentless, pouring down in heavy sheets and soaking everything in its path. Emma Brooks pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders as she hurried down the dimly lit street, her shoes splashing through puddles. The cold bit at her skin, and her feet ached from another long shift at Sunny's diner. As she passed the bus stop near the corner of 8th and Main, something caught her eye. A small figure was huddled under the shelter, shivering. Emma slowed her pace, her heart sinking as she got closer. It was a boy, no older than 8, his clothes soaked through and his teeth chattering from the cold. "Hey there," Emma said softly, kneeling down beside him. Her voice was warm, but her heart clenched at the sight of his pale, frightened face. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The boy looked up at her, his big brown eyes filled with fear. "I don't have anyone," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of the rain. I'm hungry." Emma's chest tightened. She glanced around, but the street was empty, the rain masking the usual hum of the city. Without a second thought, "Come with me," she said gently. "Let's get you warmed up." The boy hesitated for a moment before taking her hand. Emma led him back to the diner, her mind racing. She didn't know his story, but she didn't need to. All she knew was that he needed help and she couldn't just walk away. The warm light of Sunny's diner spilled out onto the wet pavement as they stepped inside. Emma grabbed a blanket from the back and wrapped it around the boy's small frame before guiding him to a booth. "Wait here," she said with a reassuring smile. A few minutes later, she returned with a steaming bowl of soup and a slice of bread. The boy's eyes lit up as he took the first bite, and Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. What Emma didn't realize was that someone was watching. Across the street, in a sleek black car, Ethan Cole sat silently, his gaze fixed on the scene unfolding inside the diner. Ethan was a man who had everything: wealth, power, and influence. But something about Emma's selflessness struck a chord deep within him. He watched as she cared for the boy, her kindness flowing effortlessly despite her own exhaustion. "Who is she?" Ethan murmured to himself, his mind racing. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him: admiration, curiosity, and maybe even something more. Ethan Cole couldn't get her out of his mind. That night, as the rain continued to pour, he sat in the backseat of his sleek black car, staring out the window at the glowing sign of Sunny's Diner. The image of the young waitress, her tired but kind eyes, the way she had cared for the boy without hesitation, played over and over in his head. Ethan was no stranger to success. At 35, he was the CEO of Cole Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar corporation that dominated industries from real estate to technology. His life was filled with luxury, penthouses, private jets, and invitations to exclusive galas. But for all his wealth, Ethan often felt a hollow emptiness he couldn't quite explain. That night, watching Emma Brooks, something shifted. Her selflessness, her quiet strength, it was unlike anything he'd seen in the world he lived in. He wanted to know more about her. The next morning, Ethan made a decision. He instructed his driver to take him back to the diner. When he stepped inside Sunny's Diner, the contrast between his polished appearance and the humble surroundings couldn't have been more stark. His tailored suit and expensive watch seemed out of place among the cracked tiles and faded booths. But Ethan didn't care. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on her. Emma was behind the counter, pouring coffee for a customer. She looked just as tired as she had the night before, but her smile was genuine, her voice warm as she chatted with the regulars. Ethan took a seat at one of the booths, and it didn't take long for Emma to notice him. She approached with her notepad in hand, her expression polite but curious. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft but steady. "What can I get for you?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, caught off guard by how much more striking she was up close. Her eyes, a deep shade of hazel, held a quiet determination that intrigued him. "Just coffee," he said finally, offering a small smile. Emma nodded and turned to pour him a cup. As she set it down in front of him, she couldn't help but notice how out of place he seemed. His suit alone probably cost more than her monthly rent. "First time here?" she asked, trying to make conversation. Ethan chuckled softly. "Is it that obvious?" "A little," Emma admitted, her lips curving into a small smile. "We don't usually get customers in suits around here." Ethan leaned back in his seat, studying her. "I like to try new places," he said vaguely. "And I heard this diner has the best coffee in town." Emma laughed lightly, shaking her head. "Whoever told you that was lying. But I'll take the compliment." Their conversation was brief, but it left an impression on both of them. Ethan watched as Emma moved around the diner, her interactions with customers filled with genuine care. She wasn't just doing her job, she was making people feel seen, valued. When it came time to leave, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. He placed it under his coffee cup along with a generous tip and quietly slipped out the door. Emma didn't notice the envelope until she was clearing the table. Her brow furrowed as she picked it up, her name scrawled neatly across the front. Curious, she opened it and her breath caught in her throat. Inside was a stack of crisp bills totaling $5,000, along with a handwritten note. "Your kindness inspired me. Use this to make your dreams come true." Emma's hands trembled as she read the note. She looked around the diner, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man who had left it, but he was already gone. For a moment, she just stood there, overwhelmed. Who was this man? And why would he do something like this for her? Little did she know, this was only the beginning. Emma sat in the small break room of Sunny's diner, the envelope still clutched tightly in her hands. The $5,000 inside felt unreal, like something out of a dream. She had counted it twice just to be sure, but the number didn't change. Her eyes drifted back to the note. "Your kindness inspired me. Use this to make your dreams come true." Dreams. The word lingered in her mind, stirring up emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She had dreams once, big ones. She used to imagine opening her own cafe, a place where people could come not just for food, but for comfort, for community. But life had a way of burying dreams under the weight of reality. Emma sighed, setting the envelope down on the table. She couldn't stop thinking about the man who had left it. Who was he? Why had he done this? And what did he mean by inspired? Her first instinct was to return the money. It felt too much, too generous. She didn't know this man, and she certainly didn't feel like she deserved such a gift. But as she thought about it more, doubt crept in. The diner door creaked open, and Emma glanced up to see her boss, Marge, poking her head in. "Emma, you okay? You've been back here a while," Marge said, her voice gruff but concerned. Emma hesitated, then held up the envelope. "Someone left this for me. $5,000. I don't know what to do." Marge's eyes widened. "5,000? Are you serious?" Emma nodded. It doesn't feel right. Why would someone do this for me?" Marge crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Maybe because you're one of the kindest people I've ever met. You're always helping others, Emma. Maybe someone finally noticed." Emma looked down at the envelope again, her thoughts swirling. The money could change so much. She could pay off some of her debts, maybe even put a little aside for Lily's education. But it also felt like a weight, a responsibility she wasn't sure she was ready for. That night, as she walked home, the envelope tucked safely in her bag, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that her life was at a crossroads. She didn't know who the man was or why he had chosen her. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about the money. It was about something bigger. A week had passed since Emma found the envelope, but the mystery of the man who left it lingered in her mind. She had used part of the money to pay off overdue bills and set the rest aside for Lily's education. Still, she couldn't help but wonder, who was he, and why had he chosen her? The answer came one quiet afternoon at Sunny's diner. The lunch rush had just ended, and Emma was wiping down tables when the door swung open. She glanced up, and her heart skipped a beat. It was him. The man from before, the one in the expensive suit, walked in, his presence commanding but not intimidating. He looked around the diner, his sharp blue eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. Emma straightened, her hands tightening around the rag she was holding. She wasn't sure what to say or how to feel. Part of her wanted to thank him, but another part of her was still grappling with the idea of accepting such a generous gift. He approached her with a small, polite smile. "Hi," he said, his voice smooth but warm. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Emma shook her head, quickly setting the rag aside. "No, not at all. Can I get you something?" "Just a coffee," he replied, taking a seat at one of the booths. Emma nodded and hurried to pour him a cup, her mind racing. When she returned, she set the coffee down in front of him and hesitated. "You're the one who left the envelope, aren't you?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. The man didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned back in his seat, studying her for a moment before nodding. "I am. My name is Ethan Cole." The name rang a bell, but it took Emma a moment to place it. Ethan Cole, the CEO of Cole Enterprises. A billionaire. She blinked, trying to process the information. "Wow," she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would someone like you do something like that for me?" Ethan's expression softened. "Because I saw something in you that I don't see very often. That night, when you helped that boy, you didn't hesitate. You didn't ask for anything in return. You just acted out of kindness, and that's rare." Emma felt her cheeks flush. "I was just doing what anyone would do." "No," Ethan said firmly, leaning forward. "Not everyone would. Most people would have walked right past him, but you didn't, and that's why I wanted to help you." Emma didn't know what to say. She looked down at her hands, her mind swirling with emotions, gratitude, disbelief, and a lingering sense of unworthiness. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out another envelope, sliding it across the table toward her. Emma stared at it, her heart pounding. "What is this?" "Open it," Ethan said simply. With trembling hands, Emma opened the envelope. Inside was a set of papers, a deed. Her eyes widened as she read the words. "It's a cafe," Ethan explained. "A small place downtown. It's yours now. I want you to have it." Emma's breath caught in her throat. I can't accept this. It's too much." Ethan shook his head. "It's not too much. It's an investment in you. I've seen what you can do, Emma. You have a gift for making people feel cared for creating a sense of community. This cafe is a chance for you to do that on a bigger scale." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she looked at him. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll take it," Ethan said with a small smile, "and promise me one thing. Keep being the person you are. Keep helping people. That's all I ask." Emma nodded, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Thank you." Ethan stood, his smile growing. "You don't need to thank me. Just make it something special." As he walked out of the diner, Emma sat there, staring at the deed in her hands. Her life had just changed in a way she never could have imagined. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in her dreams again. The next few weeks were a whirlwind for Emma Brooks. The cafe Ethan had given her, Emma's Haven, was a small, charming space tucked into a quiet corner of downtown Chicago. It had been closed for months, the windows dusty and the furniture worn, but Emma saw its potential immediately. With the deed in her hands and a heart full of determination, she threw herself into the work of bringing the cafe to life. She spent her days scrubbing floors, repainting walls, and rearranging furniture. Her sister Lily helped whenever she could, balancing her schoolwork with late nights at the cafe. "Are you sure about this name?" Lily asked one evening, holding up the freshly painted sign that read Emma's Haven. Emma smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It feels right. I want this place to be more than just a cafe. I want it to be a haven, a place where people feel welcome, no matter who they are or what they're going through." Lily grinned. "I think it's perfect." Word about the cafe spread quickly thanks to Emma's regulars at Sunny's Diner. On opening day, the small space was packed with customers, some familiar faces, others complete strangers. Emma greeted each one with her signature warmth, her heart swelling with pride as she watched the cafe come to life. The menu was simple but thoughtful, with affordable options for everyone. Emma made sure to include a pay-what-you-can option for those who were struggling, just as she had once struggled. She also set up a small kindness board near the counter, where customers could leave notes of encouragement or pay for someone else's meal in advance. The cafe quickly became a hub for the community. Families came in for breakfast, students gathered to study, and regulars from the diner stopped by to show their support. Emma's Haven wasn't just a business. It was a place where people felt seen, valued, and cared for. One afternoon, as Emma was wiping down tables, she noticed a man lingering near the door. He was older, his clothes worn and his face lined with exhaustion. He hesitated, glancing at the menu before turning to leave. "Wait," Emma called out, hurrying over to him. "Please, come in." The man looked at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't have any money," he admitted quietly. Emma smiled gently. "That doesn't matter. Come sit down. I'll bring you something warm." The man nodded, his shoulders relaxing as he stepped inside. Emma guided him to a table and brought him a bowl of soup and a slice of bread. As he ate, she noticed the way his face softened, the tension in his body easing with every bite. Moments like this reminded Emma why she had fought so hard to make the cafe a reality. It wasn't about the money or the success, it was about the people. Ethan Cole visited the cafe often, though he always kept a low profile. He would sit in the corner with a cup of coffee, watching as Emma worked her magic. She had a way of making everyone feel special, and Ethan couldn't help but admire her even more with each visit. One evening, after the cafe had closed, Ethan stayed behind to help Emma clean up. "You've really created something amazing here," he said, leaning against the counter as she wiped down the espresso machine. Emma looked up at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "I couldn't have done it without you." Ethan shook his head. "All I did was give you the opportunity. You're the one who made it what it is." Emma paused, her gaze softening. "Why did you do it, Ethan? Why me?" Ethan hesitated, his usual confidence faltering for a moment. "Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That kindness, real, selfless kindness, can change the world. And I wanted to be a part of it." Emma's heart swelled at his words. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. As the weeks turned into months, Emma's Haven flourished. The cafe became a cornerstone of the community, a place where people came not just for food, but for connection. Emma poured her heart into every detail, from the menu to the cozy decor, and it showed. Ethan Cole continued to visit regularly, always taking the same seat in the corner. At first, Emma thought he was just checking in to see how the cafe was doing, but over time she began to notice something else. The way his eyes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. The way he always seemed to find an excuse to stay a little longer, offering to help with small tasks or asking about her day. At first, Emma tried to brush it off. Ethan was a billionaire, a man who lived in a world so far removed from her own that it felt impossible to imagine anything more than a professional connection between them. But the more time they spent together, the more she began to see the man behind the wealth. Ethan wasn't just generous, he was thoughtful, kind, and surprisingly down to earth. He listened when she talked about her dreams and her struggles, and he never made her feel small or unworthy. One evening, after the cafe had closed, Ethan stayed behind to help Emma clean up. The two of them worked side by side in the quiet space, the soft hum of the espresso machine the only sound. "You know," Ethan said, breaking the silence, "I've been to a lot of places in my life. Fancy restaurants, exclusive clubs, you name it. But this cafe, it's different. It feels like home." Emma paused, her hands stilling on the counter. She looked up at him, her hazel eyes searching his face. "That's what I wanted it to be," she said softly. "A place where people feel like they belong." Ethan smiled, but there was something deeper in his expression, something vulnerable. "You've done more than that, Emma. You've created something truly special, and you've reminded me of what really matters." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure if it was the way he was looking at her or the warmth in his voice, but something about the moment felt different. "Ethan," she began, her voice hesitant, "why do you keep coming back here? It's not just about the cafe, is it?" Ethan hesitated, his usual confidence faltering. Then, with a deep breath, he said, "No, it's not. I come back because of you, Emma. You've changed the way I see the world, and I think I've fallen for you." Emma's breath caught in her throat. For a moment she didn't know what to say, but as she looked into Ethan's eyes, she realized she felt the same way. "I think I've fallen for you too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's smile widened, and for the first time in a long time, Emma allowed herself to believe in the possibility of love. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Emma's life. Emma's Haven continued to thrive, becoming a beacon of hope and kindness in the community. People from all walks of life came through its doors, drawn not just by the food, but by the warmth and compassion that Emma had poured into every corner of the cafe. Ethan Cole became a constant presence in her life, not just as a supporter of the cafe, but as someone she could truly rely on. Their relationship grew slowly, built on mutual respect and understanding. Ethan admired Emma's strength and selflessness, while Emma found comfort in Ethan's steady presence and the way he always believed in her, even when she doubted herself. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Emma and Ethan stood outside the cafe, watching as the last customers of the day trickled out. The warm glow of the cafe's lights spilled onto the sidewalk, and the sign above the door, Emma's Haven, shone. Ethan slipped his hand into hers, his touch gentle but firm. "You've created something incredible here," he said, his voice filled with pride. Emma smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without you." "You could have," Ethan replied, turning to look at her. "But I'm glad I got to be a part of it." Emma looked up at him, her hazel eyes shining. "You didn't just help me build a cafe, Ethan. You helped me believe in myself again, and for that, I'll always be grateful." Ethan smiled, his gaze softening. "You've changed my life too, Emma. More than you'll ever know." As they stood there, hand in hand, watching the world go by, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She had her cafe, her community, and now she had Ethan. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, Emma wasn't afraid. She knew that as long as she had kindness in her heart and the people she loved by her side, anything was possible. And as the lights of Emma's Haven glowed behind them, Emma realized that her story wasn't just about finding success or love. It was about the power of compassion and how it could transform not just one life, but many. And that's the story of how one act of kindness changed Emma's life forever. It's a reminder that no matter how small, compassion can create ripples that transform lives in ways we can't even imagine. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more heartwarming tales like this, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Emma's Stories, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. And remember, kindness is free. Spread it everywhere you go. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.